that moment, I thought he just wanted to take control because he was the older brother, or maybe he believed he was more rational than me. It never crossed my mind that my father would purposely leave me out of the decisions about his own funeral. There was no reason for it. We were always close, even more so than he and Aaron. In many ways, the funeral had that bitter beauty that only farewells can carry. Hundreds of people came, business colleagues, old friends, former employees, sharing stories about my father's generosity and character. Noah never left my side. His little hand gripping mine was all I needed to keep myself from falling apart. Aaron stepped up to the pulpit and gave an elegant, calculated speech, as if he were closing a deal, not saying goodbye to his father. Kimberly, dressed in designer mourning, Millie dabbed her eyes with an embroidered handkerchief, which clearly never touched a real tear. When it was my turn, I tried to find the words I spoke about when he taught me to fish. About how he never missed a school recital, and how he'd call me every Sunday just to check in until the week he passed. As I spoke, I noticed Aaron. He was watching me, but not with sadness, not with compassion. His gaze was different, cold, calculating, as if doing math in his head. The will reading is Friday, he muttered as the guests were leaving the hall. Gregory's office, 2 p.m., don't be late. Gregory had been the family's lawyer for decades. I knew him from parties and gatherings, always seemed professional, though a bit distant. I thought it would be a formality, painful, but straightforward. Dad was always organized, always made things clear. I was wrong. The building where Gregory's office was located was imposing, glass, steel, and arrogance. Noah had a half day at school, so he came with me. He sat beside me in the waiting room, with a worn-out astronomy book in his lap. Ever since James showed him the constellations, it became his passion. Aaron and Kimberly arrived right on time, dressed like they were about to sign $1 million contract. Kimberly barely looked at me, but ruffled Noah's hair with that forced gesture typical of people who don't know how to deal with kids. "Hey champ, still struggling with your times tables," she said, with that tone of fake concern. Little did she know Noah had long moved past multiplication. He was diving into pre-algebra, facing challenges with courage and curiosity. "I'm reading about black holes," he whispered, eyes still on the page. "You're right," I whispered, pressing a kiss to the crown of his head. "We're going to make it through this." Back then, I had no idea how prophetic Noah's words would turn out to be, or that turning our backs on everything would be the first step to finding our own path. 6 months after the will was read, we moved to a smaller apartment on the other side of town. I just couldn't live in that old place anymore, where every corner whispered memories of my father, fixing the leaky sink, building a shelf for Noah, showing up with bags of groceries when money was tight. The new place was nothing special. 2 bedrooms in a building a bit worn by time, but it was clean, it was safe, and above all, it was ours. A fresh start. I quit my job at the department store, partly because I couldn't stand running into Kimberly's friends shopping there, always armed with their pitying glances and sympathy wrapped in judgment. Instead, I started working at a community center with programs for kids with learning difficulties. The salary was even lower than retail, but the director, a warm woman named Dorothy, offered me flexible hours and, more importantly, genuine empathy for Noah's needs. "We all learn in different ways," she said during the interview. "Some kids just need a different path to unlock what they've got inside." It was the first time in years that someone spoke about my son's challenges as a promise, not as a problem. I had to fight back tears right there. Noah started at a new school, one with a program designed for kids with learning differences. At his old school, they treated him like he was slow, always forcing standardized tests that never showed who he really was. But here, in this new place, his teacher Benjamin saw something everyone else had ignored. "Your son has an incredible memory for conversations," he told me during our first meeting. "He remembers word-for-word dialogues from weeks ago. Have you noticed that at home?" I'd always thought it was just one of his quirks. Noah remembered exactly what I said I wanted for Christmas 3 years ago. He could recite entire movie scenes after watching them once. He memorized phone numbers without ever writing them down. He still struggles with written texts, Benjamin continued, but the way he processes and retains what he hears is amazing. We're adapting the curriculum to build on that, while supporting the areas where he has more difficulty. For the first time since James died, I felt like someone truly saw my son, that it was at the community center that I met Heather, a program coordinator who quickly became the sister life had never given me. Unlike Kimberly, who always looked at me with barely disguised contempt, Heather was kind, welcoming. She offered to watch Noah when I had to work late, and soon invited us into her family gatherings like we already belonged. Blood doesn't make a family, she once told me, watching Noah play with her kids. Love does. And that little boy of yours, he's got enough love in his heart to light up a whole city. Little by little, we rebuilt our lives, not over what we'd lost, but with what we still had in our hands. I started a support group for single parents of kids with learning challenges. We shared struggles, real advice, and a space free of judgment, only empathy. Noah joined a science club, where he could explore his passion for astronomy and physics. We were far from living in luxury. We still counted every penny at the grocery store and shopped at thrift stores. But for the first time in a long while, we were stable, and in a simple way, happy. As the months passed, Noah's unique gifts became more and more clear. He had an extraordinary memory, able to recall dates, numbers, and conversations with almost eerie precision. Benjamin suggested we start a journal to track his abilities. And as the entries grew, patterns emerged. Noah still struggled with reading and some math concepts, but his auditory memory was nearly photographic. He's not disabled, Benjamin told me firmly. He's neurodivergent, and in some ways, incredibly gifted. Noah began to flourish under this new perspective. His confidence grew as teachers started adapting lessons to his learning style. Instead of written exams, he gave oral presentations. When lessons were explained out loud instead of just on paper, he absorbed everything like a sponge. One quiet evening, as we were walking home from the community center, Noah caught me off guard. He began repeating word for word a conversation I'd had with my father almost 2 years earlier. "You were in the kitchen making spaghetti," he said. "Grandpa called, and you put him on speaker while you stirred the sauce. He said he was updating the will and wanted you to know that half of everything would go to you, and the other half to Uncle Aaron. You told him you didn't want to talk about him dying, and he laughed and said, 'I'm not planning on dying just yet, sweetheart, but a man my age needs to have things in order.' Then you asked if he wanted to have dinner with us, and he said he couldn't because he had a poker game with Mr. Lester from down the street." I stopped walking, just stood there frozen on the sidewalk, staring at my son with my heart pounding. "Noah, that ***, that's exactly right. How do you remember that in such detail?" "Because Grandpa said half for you, and half for Uncle Aaron. But that's not what happened, right? Uncle got everything." The brutal simplicity of those words hit me like a punch. My father had told me his intentions, clearly, and Noah had been there. He had heard. He remembered. For the first time since the will reading, the doubt that had haunted me was replaced by a sharp certainty. Something was very wrong with that story, but it was already too late. Aaron had taken over Dad's business, sold the house, gathered the assets, and locked everything behind a vault of silence. Any chance to contest the will in court had vanished, and honestly, the life we'd rebuilt was too precious to risk in a courtroom full of mud and resentment. "You're right," I murmured, squeezing my son's hand gently. "But we're okay without that money, aren't we?" He nodded, thoughtful. "We are, but it's not right. Grandpa wouldn't have liked it." "No," I agreed, my throat tightening. "He wouldn't have." What I didn't realize at the time was that Noah wasn't just venting. He was planning. Almost a year after my father died, the invitation arrived. An elegant envelope, cream with golden details, announcing Aaron and Kimberly's vow renewal for their 10th wedding anniversary. I stood there, staring at that piece of paper like it was some kind of provocation. Why would they invite me, after everything? "Are we going?" Noah asked, peeking over my shoulder. "Not a chance," I said, tossing the invite toward the trash. The thought of watching Aaron and Kimberly celebrate their perfect life, partly funded by what was rightfully ours, made my stomach turn. But to my surprise, Noah picked the invitation back up. "I think we should go." I looked at him like he'd just suggested we vacation on Mars. Why on earth would we do that to ourselves? He shrugged, with that thoughtful expression that had become more and more common lately. "I just think it might be important." "Important? How, Noah? To see Uncle Aaron flaunting Grandpa's money? To be sneered at by Kimberly and her friends like we're some kind of charity case? No, sweetheart, thanks, but no. Please, Mom." This time, he asked with a firmness that disarmed me. I've never asked to see them before, just this once. That caught me off guard. Noah had never shown any interest in Aaron or Kimberly, not even before that disgusting fight over the inheritance. Quite the opposite. He always looked uncomfortable around them. I told Heather everything the next morning over coffee. I just don't get why he wants to go. It makes no sense. Her face changed, darkened, tense. What doesn't make sense, Audrey, is them inviting you after everything they did to you. That's what's strange. I wouldn't trust it for a second. Her words reignited something in me, a spark that time and grief had nearly extinguished. Benjamin wasn't just Noah's teacher anymore. Over the months, he'd become part of our routine, a friendly face at school events, community meetings, someone whose presence made the air lighter. And sometimes, I'd catch him looking at me in a way, like he saw something in me that I couldn't even see myself, while I was still unsure about how I felt. The rumors started to spread. People in the community were talking about Aaron's new business ventures. Apparently, he was expanding my father's old company, diving into the luxury construction market. Big projects, risky ones. They drew attention, sure, but there was a scent of instability in the air. The rumors spoke of nervous investors, of regulators starting to investigate. None of it surprised me. Aaron had always been like that, endlessly ambitious, but reckless. He took shortcuts where my father laid solid foundations. Noah, on the other hand, started acting different, withdrawn. He'd spend hours on the home computer, quickly closing windows whenever I walked into the room. I caught him whispering on the phone a few times, like he didn't want to be heard. I asked who he was talking to. The answer came sharp. Just a school project, Mom. Under other circumstances, that might have set off alarm bells. But it was Noah. He had my trust. He wasn't just any kid, and I knew whatever it wasn't dangerous. Still, his sudden interest in Aaron and Kimberly's vow renewal had me on edge. 2 weeks before the ceremony, I gave in. Okay, we'll go. But the moment something feels off, we're leaving. Got it. Noah's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in ages. Not since before we lost my dad. Thanks, Mom. I promise you won't regret it. But for some reason, his confidence only made me more uneasy. We went to a thrift store together to find decent clothes. I picked out a simple blue dress, the same shade Benjamin once said brought out my eyes. Noah, in khaki pants and a button-down shirt, looked older, almost like a young man. I didn't spend much, but I refused to show up looking defeated. I wanted them to see us with dignity, not as victims of fate. The night before the event, I walked into Noah's room. He was surrounded by papers, handwritten notes in his careful penmanship, printed documents, and what looked like transcribed conversations. What is all this? I asked, picking up one of the pages from the bed. Noah quickly gathered the papers into a folder, his eyes scanning for any loose ends. Just getting organized for tomorrow, he said, trying to sound casual. Noah, I said, sitting down on the edge of his bed, what's going on? This isn't like you. He looked at me for a long moment, then dropped a sentence that sent a chill down my spine. Sometimes, you have to let them think they've won, before showing them they've lost for real. Where did you hear that, Grandpa? In a talk about business. I looked at my son's face again, and for a moment, I saw traces of his father and grandfather there. The same firm jaw, the same intelligent spark in the eyes. And that's when I realized, maybe I'd underestimated not just his capacity, but how much he understood from the very beginning. Noah, we're not going to that ceremony for revenge, I said gently, choosing my words carefully. That's not who we are. It's not revenge, he corrected, without missing a beat. It's justice. There's a difference. I left his room that night with a knot in my chest. Part of me worried, the other in awe. My boy wasn't so little anymore, and he saw far beyond what I imagined. Whatever he was planning for that vow renewal, I could feel something big was about to happen. The venue Aaron and Kimberly had chosen was exactly what I expected, an exclusive country club with panoramic views of the city, flawless gardens, and a banquet hall that probably cost more for one night than I paid in rent all year. I gripped Noah's hand tightly as we approached the entrance. Even dressed up, we felt out of place. We can still turn around, I whispered, as the uniformed valet took the keys to my beat-up car with a poorly disguised look of disdain. We have as much right to be here as anyone, he said firmly. Grandpa would want us here. The hall was already packed, over 200 people in designer clothes, crystal glasses in hand, trading polished smiles. I recognized some of my father's old friends and business partners. Most had vanished after the will was read. Now, seeing me, they just gave awkward nods, like ghosts from the past had shown up to the wrong party. Margaret, my father's cousin, walked up with that tight smile that hides judgment behind a thin veil of politeness. She never really approved of my parents' marriage. Not out of hate, but because she had always dreamed of Kimberly marrying someone from their country club circle, not the son of a contractor who built his empire with his own hands. No matter how successful he became. Audrey, she said, air kissing near my cheek. What a surprise to see you here. And with Noah, no less. She gave my son a quick glance, cold, formal, then turned back to me. Kimberly mentioned, you might show up. Very brave, considering everything. Everything dripped with venom. She clearly knew about the inheritance drama, most likely spoon-fed by Kimberly herself. With all the usual filters, we wouldn't miss a chance to celebrate. With family, I said, forcing a smile that pulled at muscles I didn't know I had. Of course, family is so important, she replied, with a fake sweetness that wouldn't fool a toddler. Your name's on card 23, all the way in the back, the farthest from the main table. Of course, I leaned over to Noah as she walked away, keeping my voice low. Last chance to leave with our heads held high. Not yet, he said, that same unwavering look in his eyes. We need to stay through dinner, at least. The ceremony was a full-on display of wealth. Kimberly wore a dress that probably cost more than a full year of Noah's therapy. Aaron, stiff in his expensive suit, looked like a mannequin. They renewed their vows, celebrating money, power, and almost no love. I stayed in the back of the hall, trying to disappear among the chairs, while Noah watched everything with a sharp, unreadable focus, like he was recording every detail. At the reception, we were led to our table, surrounded by distant faces, people invited out of obligation, some elderly relatives no one bothered to talk to, a couple of Aaron's new employees, to be seated up front. No one there seemed eager to chat with the disinherited sister, and her slow son, fine by me. I pushed food around my plate, counting the minutes until we could leave with minimum politeness. When Aaron showed up out of nowhere, playing host, handing out smiles and handshakes like he was running for office, Audrey, Noah, so glad you made it. Aaron's voice was just loud enough to make sure. Nearby tables heard his generous display of kindness to the less fortunate family. Congratulations, I said, keeping my tone neutral. The party's really beautiful. Kimberly deserves the best, he replied, glancing smugly around the fancy ballroom. This year has been incredibly successful. The message was clear, that success had been built on our father's money. I swallowed hard, biting back the response burning in my throat, reminded myself we were here because of Noah, even if I didn't understand why. And how's work at the community center going? Aaron asked with fake concern. Must be a real shift from the department store. Huh, I love what I do, I answered honestly, helping kids and seeing the difference it makes. That's priceless. For a split second, something flickered in his face. Subtle, but telling. He expected to see envy, maybe bitterness. All he got was peace. Well, if you ever need help making ends meet, he started oozing superiority. We're doing just fine, thanks, I cut in. But I appreciate the concern. Aaron nodded, with a stiff smile, and walked away. It was obvious my refusal to play the poor relative was bothering him more than he'd admit. After dinner, the speeches began. Kimberly's father raised his glass, praising the couple's shine and the success of their union. Then came some friends with rehearsed jokes about their perfect 10 years. Then Aaron stood up, champagne glass in hand. He addressed the guests with his usual spotlight charm. Kimberly and I have been blessed not only with 10 amazing years of marriage, but with a success that exceeded all expectations. He paused for dramatic effect, smiled like he had the world in his pocket. My father always told me that prosperity comes to those with vision, those who seize the right opportunities, and I honored that lesson by taking the family business and growing it into. I clutched my water glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. My father had always taught us that true prosperity came from honest work and respect for others, values Aaron had clearly buried with the coffin. As the waiters started clearing the dinner plates, Kimberly wobbled over to our table, champagne glass trembling in her hand, a smile sharp enough to cut skin. Audrey, So glad you came to witness our big day, she said loudly. Since you're here, maybe you could help the staff clean up the tables. You're used to that kind of work now, right? Nearby guests let out polite snickers, and my face flushed hot. Right then, everything clicked. This wasn't about peace. It was a trap. There was never a real invitation. This was a show. Thank you for coming, she continued, her voice echoing through the now quiet room. Now, get to work. You can start clearing. I froze, speechless, like my body had been yanked out of place. Every eye turned to me, judging, amused, indifferent. That's when I felt Noah's hand under the table, gripping mine tight. Then Margaret, her mother, stumbled over, drunk off champagne, and spit venom with a crooked smile. Use your brain-dead son to help, too, she sneered with a laugh. It's not like he's good for anything else. This time, the laughter was louder. Some nervous, some cruel and genuine. Each chuckle felt like a slap across the face. Tears welled up as I grabbed my purse, ready to flee that nightmare. But then, Noah stood up. Excuse me, he said, voice like stone. Can I use the microphone for a second? I have a surprise for the bride. My heart nearly stopped. Noah, don't do this, I whispered, pleading. But he was already walking toward the small stage, where the band had just begun setting up. Kimberly frowned, clearly annoyed, but there was a wicked gleam of amusement in her eyes. Ah, how cute, she said to the nearby guests. The little boy wants to give a speech. I stood up, instinctively wanting to stop him, but someone appeared beside me out of nowhere. Benjamin. Yes, Benjamin, who was most certainly not on the guest list. He stepped closer and whispered, "Wait, trust him." Before I could even ask what he was doing there, Noah had already reached the mic. The massive room fell into a thick silence as my 13-year-old son adjusted the stand to his height and faced a crowd of wealthy, adjusted mental adults without flinching. I want to thank you all for being here today, he began. His voice rang out clear and steady with a confidence I had never seen before, especially because many of you, from this moment on, will serve as witnesses in a criminal investigation. The silence turned into disbelief, pure shock. See, Noah continued, I have a rare gift. Everything I hear, I remember word for word, with no mistakes. And I've been listening very closely. For the past year, my heart pounded so loud it nearly drowned out his voice. What was happening, for example, he said, reaching into the pocket of his jacket and pulling out a small digital recorder. I remember perfectly when Uncle Aaron visited Grandpa in the hospital on February 12th, the same day he supposedly signed a new will. Noah pressed play, and Aaron's voice echoed through the hall. Just sign these papers, Dad. Insurance stuff. Nothing major. My father, his speech slurred from medication. Can't it wait? They gave me something. I'm a little out of it. Aaron again. It has to be today. Don't worry. Just sign where I marked. Noah paused the audio and locked eyes with Aaron, who was now pale as a ghost. Does that sound like someone fully aware he's changing his will? Kimberly stormed toward the stage. Turn that off now. This is a celebration, not a place for slander. Noah didn't even blink. I also remember a phone call Uncle Aaron made 3 weeks later, when Grandpa started asking questions about the papers he had signed, and he hit play again. Aaron's voice echoed once more, trying to sound casual. Don't worry about those hospital papers, Dad. Like I said, it was just insurance forms. The will is still the same as always, split between me and Audrey. The room reacted like it had been hit by a jolt. Whispers, shocked glances. Margaret, who moments ago had worn a triumphant smile, now clutched a nearby chair, pale, alarmed, shaken. Noah, that's enough. I finally managed to say, my voice trembling as I approached the stage. I had no idea where he got those recordings, or what else he planned to reveal, but fear was tightening my chest. Almost done, Mom, he replied with a calm that felt unreal. And then, as if rehearsed, a man in a dark suit emerged from the back of the room. My heart skipped a beat. I knew him. Edward Jameson, my father's closest friend, a respected attorney. He had retired shortly after Dad started talking about stepping away from the business. Aaron Anderson, he began, his voice slicing through the silence like a blade. For the past 6 months, I've been working with Noah to gather evidence in a clear case of fraud and elder abuse. Howard Anderson appointed me executor of the real will, the one recovered from the bank vault. The document you presented to the family was forged, and we have solid proof. Aaron snapped. He lunged toward the stage like a cornered animal, his face contorted with rage. "You little freak. How dare you?" But Benjamin moved faster. He stepped in front of Aaron with sharp precision. The two men stood face to face, tension crackling in the air. "If I were you, I wouldn't do that," Benjamin said in a low, lethal tone. "Attacking a minor in front of 200 people won't help your case in court." That's when everything clicked. Benjamin wasn't here by accident. He was with Noah. He always had been. My son. The boy everyone underestimated. Even me. "This is absurd," Kimberly cried out, desperation bleeding from every syllable. She looked around, searching for support, trying to cling to any shred of control. "This is all lies. Aaron would never." "I have copies of the original will," Edward continued, unfazed. "Medical records that show Howard was under medication known to cause confusion on the day the forged will was signed, and testimony from his doctor confirming he lacked legal capacity to make decisions at that time." Noah presented recordings that clearly show a pattern of deceit, and that will carry serious weight in court. The room exploded into chaos. Guests stood, stunned. Servers froze mid-step. Photographers, once ready to capture a fairy tale, were now documenting a disaster. Margaret collapsed into a chair, as if the ground had vanished beneath her. Aaron remained standing, pale, frozen. His jaw trembled, an involuntary tick of a man watching his empire crumble. Noah calmly stepped down from the stage and returned to my side, slipping his small hand into mine like he'd just finished a school presentation. Not like someone who had just destroyed his own family. "Told you we had to stay after dinner," he said simply. The next few minutes felt like a movie, one I never thought I'd star in. Security guards appeared, probably called by Kimberly or Aaron, but Edward stepped forward, firm, and announced, removing us now would be interfering with an ongoing fraud investigation. They backed off, stunned. Whispers spread like wildfire across the hall. Some guests quietly slipped out, as if they could escape the shame. Noah remained calm, as if everything was under control. He led us to a more secluded corner of the room, where Benjamin and Edward were already waiting. My head spun with 1,000 questions, but before I could say anything, Noah started to explain. "I started recording conversations right after Grandpa died," he said casually. "I felt something was off. Grandpa always said, when someone's lying, they say different things to different people. So I wanted to keep track." "But how did you?" I asked, pointing to the small recorder still in his hand. "Benjamin helped me with the right equipment," he replied, casting a grateful look at his teacher. "Special microphones, software. We trained a lot." Benjamin nodded. "Noah came to me about 7 months ago with detailed notes of conversations he overheard between Aaron and Kimberly. His memory is extraordinary. Dates, exact words, full context. When he showed me the first recordings from his phone, I realized this was serious." Edward then stepped forward, wearing the expression of someone holding the final piece of the puzzle. "Benjamin came to me because I was an old friend of Howard's. Noah shared his suspicions and the initial evidence, and that's when I began my own investigation. What we uncovered is worse than anyone here can imagine. I don't understand." My voice barely came out, trying to process what had just happened. "How did Noah get recordings of Aaron at the hospital? And those calls?" Noah lowered his eyes, like the courage that carried him through the crowd had now slipped through his fingers. "I started recording Uncle Aaron whenever he was around. At first it was just in case. Then, when I noticed a strange pattern, I started following him sometimes." "Following him," I repeated, unable to hide my shock. "Only sometimes," he muttered. "When you thought I was at the science club, I was at the cafe across from his office, or a few tables away at restaurants. Kids go unnoticed, Mom. You can sit real close with a backpack on your lap, and no one pays attention." Part of me froze at the risks he took, but another part couldn't help but admire his intelligence and courage. "Noah, that was very dangerous," I said, trying to keep a calm but firm tone. "You could have gotten into serious trouble." "I was careful," he replied firmly. "And it mattered. They stole from us, Mom. They lied about Grandpa." Before I could answer, a stir began on the other side of the room. Aaron, face blazing, was arguing with a group of sharply dressed men who had just arrived. Investors, I recognized them from past events, all involved in Aaron's newest real estate projects. "This is a private family event," he shouted, struggling to maintain control. Whatever Gregory told you can wait until Monday. Gregory didn't say anything. One of the men replied, his voice cold as stone. We received anonymous emails with documents showing your father's estate funds were hidden inside manipulated investment contracts. I turned to look at Noah, who just shrugged. I found some papers in Uncle Aaron's folder. When he came to our house after the funeral, I made copies. Edward cleared his throat behind us. That specific part of the investigation wasn't my idea, but I admit it accelerated everything. On the other side of the hall, Kimberly was still trying in vain to salvage the evening. Her voice pierced the air, high-pitched, desperate, ... double quotes please, everyone. This is all a huge misunderstanding. The music will start soon, and we have an amazing dessert waiting. But no one was listening. Guests were already scattering toward the exits, phones in hand, recording, snapping pictures, spreading the scandal in real time. Margaret had vanished without a trace. The servers stood by the wedding cake, untouched, looking lost, waiting for instructions that would never come. What now? What happens next? I asked Edward. Legally, I've already filed a petition to nullify the fake will. With all the evidence we gathered, the court should reinstate Howard's original will, splitting everything between you and Aaron, with special provisions for Noah's education. And Aaron? My voice came out low, but heavy. Edward's expression turned grim. Fraud, elder abuse, and possibly embezzlement, considering what we're uncovering in his business dealings. The criminal implications are serious. I didn't feel relief, nor revenge. Only a hollow ache, a raw sadness that it had come to this, that my brother had not only destroyed our relationship, but betrayed our father's trust. Noah seemed to sense my silence. I didn't do this to hurt Uncle Aaron, Mom. I did it because it's what Grandpa would have done. He believed in justice. Benjamin stepped forward, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. Your son is remarkable, Audrey, and not despite his differences, but because of them, the way he sees the world, his memory, his attention to detail, that's what allowed him to notice what no one else did. Why didn't you tell me what you were doing? I asked, still trying to grasp how this boy, who sometimes struggled with the simplest tasks, had become such a precise and determined investigator. You would have worried, he answered simply, and maybe tried to stop me. You always talk about doing what's right. But sometimes, doing what's right means you have to fight. Words that once belonged to my father, now coming from the mouth of my son. That moment broke me, and the tears came unstoppable. But our brief peace was shattered. Aaron burst through the crowd, pushing his way toward us, face twisted, in hatred, eyes locked on mine. Fury about to explode. You think you've won. This isn't over. I'll fight this to the end. That's your right, Edward replied, calm as ever, a sharp contrast to the chaos unfolding around us. But think carefully, Aaron. The evidence is solid, and a public trial will only increase the exposure of everything you've done. Your investors, they're already starting to question things. He's right, said a new voice. It was Gregory, the attorney who had introduced himself as my father's representative during the will reading. But now, he was nothing like the confident man I had met that day. He looked smaller, worn down. Aaron, we need to talk about damage control, and we need to do it now. You should be on my side, Aaron barked, completely unraveling. Gregory shot a tense glance at Edward before trying to explain. I warned you about the legal risks of presenting an alternative will. I never said I supported the idea of claiming Howard was fully aware when he signed it. You examined him personally, Aaron insisted, his voice near panic. I never did that, Gregory fired back, stepping away. I made it clear I couldn't be present for ethical reasons. If you're suggesting I helped fake your father's lucidity. The argument escalated fast, words turning into accusations. Meanwhile, security guards were already trying to clear the hall, now engulfed in a storm of whispers, frantic phone calls, and terrified faces. Benjamin stepped closer and gently guided us toward a side exit. You've seen enough for one night, he murmured, as we walked through the garden toward the parking lot. I heard someone call out, Audrey, wait. I turned around and saw Kimberly rushing toward us, her gown dragging across the ground as she tried desperately to hold it up. Her face was smeared with makeup, her eyes burning with rage. You destroyed everything, she hissed once. She reached me. Is this what you wanted? Are you happy now? I stared at the woman, the same one who mocked my son, the same one who helped steal what was rightfully mine. the same one who invited me here just to humiliate me in front of everyone. But I felt no satisfaction, just a deep, bone-heavy exhaustion, a sadness that reached the core of my soul. No, Kimberly, I'm not happy that my brother betrayed our father's memory and deceived everyone. I'm not happy that my son had to become a teenage detective at 13, but I am relieved, because at least now, the truth is out. The truth, she laughed bitterly, her eyes flashing. You want the truth? Howard always preferred Aaron. Always. He only kept you around out of pity. After you fell apart when James died, Aaron simply made official what your father had already wanted for years. Noah stepped forward, steady as ever. That's not true. I have recordings of Grandpa talking about Mom too. Want to hear them? Kimberly flinched as if he had pulled a weapon. Keep that freak away from me. You have no idea the damage you've done. Aaron's investors are bailing. Our reputation, it's ruined. Benjamin stepped forward calmly, his voice sharp and quiet. You did this to yourselves. I suggest you go back to your party, or what's left of it. We watched as she turned away, alone, her white silhouette framed against the darkening sky. Alone, maybe for the first time, with no audience. I'm sorry it had to be this way, Mom, Noah said as we walked together, but I didn't know any other way to fix it. I pulled my son close, heart aching with pride, with sorrow, and relief. How could someone so young carry so much courage, so much clarity? You don't have to apologize for anything. If anyone failed here, it was me, for not protecting you better. But you did protect me, he said without hesitation. You taught me what's right. And that's why I couldn't let them get away with it. When we reached the car, Benjamin hesitated for a moment. I think I should give you to some space. After everything. Actually, I began, surprising even myself with how steady I sounded. I think it'd be nice to have a friend close by. Maybe we could grab some ice cream. I think we've earned it. Benjamin's smile was kind, but there was something more behind it. A new light in his eyes. I think that's exactly what we need. As the car pulled away from the club, I glanced one last time in the rearview mirror. That elegant building once filled with vanity and lies now looked hollow, cold. Maybe it wasn't the ending people expected, but it was the new beginning we desperately needed. The weeks after the wedding confrontation blurred together. Meetings with lawyers, endless paperwork, and long silences, full of bitter reflection. Edward moved quickly. He officially annulled the forged will, using all the evidence Noah had gathered, along with the medical statement confirming that on that day, my father was under medication that impaired his clarity. The judge didn't hesitate. There wasn't even a need for a full hearing. The ruling came quickly, and it was in our favor. Meanwhile, the investigation into Aaron's businesses was growing. The anonymous emails Noah had sent to investors had raised red flags, and suddenly, everything made sense. Aaron had used our father's name and reputation to secure funding for projects that, in reality, were just smoke and mirrors. Big plans, built on empty promises. With fear spreading, investors pulled out, and the house of cards crumbled. Piece by piece, Edward found the real will inside the bank vault. Exactly where Noah said it would be. Exactly where my father had promised he'd leave it. The division was fair, half for me, half for Aaron, and a special trust, dedicated solely to Noah's education. Your father was very proud of Noah, Edward told me as we reviewed the documents. He made sure the funds would support whatever educational path best developed his unique gifts. Howard saw in Noah a potential the world insisted on ignoring. Hearing that broke me. The tears came, not from pain, but relief. Months of doubt, of wondering if my father had truly abandoned us. But it was all planted by Aaron. A lie, nothing more. Justice didn't just give me back my rightful inheritance. It also granted financial compensation for the money Aaron had embezzled, money that should have come to me a year ago. Suddenly, after so long counting coins, I had security. And there was an irony to it all. Aaron tried to paint me as someone incapable of handling money. But it was because of him that I finally had the chance to prove otherwise. Noah and I left our tiny apartment behind and moved into a modest but cozy house with 3 bedrooms and a backyard where he finally set up the telescope Grandpa had given him years ago. I kept working at the community center. Not because I needed the paycheck anymore, but because the work filled something in me. It made sense. It made a difference, especially in the lives of the children. With Edward's guidance, I started a foundation for kids with learning difficulties, especially those with rare memory gifts like Noah. We named it the Howard Anderson Foundation for Exceptional Minds. Grandpa would have loved this, Noah said after reading the mission statement. He always said everyone has something special if you just know where to look. On the other side of the story, Aaron's legal troubles only got worse. With the fraud investigation growing, he and Kimberly sold the mansion and moved to a much smaller home in another city. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Kimberly filed for divorce. She didn't want to carry the weight of their social and financial downfall. I didn't feel joy at their fall. Aaron was still my brother, and I remembered when we were close, before ambition and greed swallowed what was left of our childhood. With Edward's help, I made a deal to keep Aaron out of prison as long as he cooperated with the investigation and reimbursed the investors. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the kind of choice that gave me peace. Noah blossomed in ways I had only dreamed of, but never truly believed were possible. With the right support and respect for the unique way he learned his grades, shot up. Benjamin stayed involved, developing techniques that used Noah's exceptional auditory memory while also strengthening his weak spots. Over time, Benjamin became part of our life, first as a mentor, then as a friend, and eventually, something more. Our first official date was a visit to the planetarium, an exhibit Noah had been begging to see for weeks. It wasn't exactly romantic, but for us, it was perfect. Knew you two would end up together, Noah blurted from the back seat, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I recorded how Benjamin's voice changes when he talks about you. It's a classic physiological response of someone in love. Noah, I cut in, blushing hard, while Benjamin burst out laughing. Your son missed his calling. He should have been a detective, he joked. 6 months had passed since that chaotic wedding night, when one ordinary afternoon, an unexpected visitor showed up at my door. Margaret, Kimberly's mother, stood on my porch, looking nothing like the polished woman I remembered. I know I don't have the right to be here, she began, a strange mix of shame and strength in her voice, but I had to apologize for what I said about Noah. It was cruel, and I was wrong. He's extraordinary. I didn't invite her in, but I didn't send her away either. I just stood there, listening. Kimberly and I haven't spoken since she left Aaron, she continued, her voice breaking. I'm trying to figure out where it all went wrong with my daughter. And maybe it started with me, with mothers like me, teaching the wrong values. Her honesty caught me off guard. Everyone makes mistakes, Margaret. The real question is what we choose to do with them. Yeah, she whispered. Well, I won't take up any more of your time. I just wanted you to know I regret what I said and how I acted. As she turned to leave, something inside me wouldn't let her go in silence. Margaret, Noah is presenting a project at the science fair next month. It's about memory techniques. If you want to see what he's capable of, you're welcome to come. Her face softened. Not with tears, but with something gentler. Maybe recognition. Maybe hope. I'd love that, she said. There were no promises of forgiveness in that phrase. No guarantees the wounds would heal overnight. But there was an opening, a chance to begin again. Exactly 1 year after my father's death, we opened the Howard Anderson Center for Children with Learning Differences. The project, funded by the foundation, was housed in a restored building right next to the community center where I still worked. There, we would offer specialized tutoring, memory training, and most importantly, real support for children who learn differently. Noah cut the ribbon, beaming, as the local news cameras flashed. In the audience, teary eyes, pride, hope. It was more than an opening. It was a new beginning. When a reporter asked what made the center so special, Noah answered with that simple wisdom that always left me speechless. Everybody's brain works differently, he said, confident. Some people think different means broken, but it doesn't. Sometimes, the things that make school hard make other things easier. Like me, I remember every conversation I hear that used to just make me seem weird. But now, I know it's actually a superpower. Later that evening, Benjamin helped Noah set up the telescope in the backyard. Meanwhile, I found myself flipping through my dad's old photo album. One image stopped me, him holding baby Noah, looking at him like he was holding the entire universe. I had forgotten that look I had let Aaron's lies cloud the bond between my father and my son. He'd be so proud of you too, Benjamin said, finding me with the album in my lap. Howard knew Noah was special. And he knew you were strong enough to weather any storm. For a while. I didn't believe that myself, I admitted. But you kept going. You built a new life for you and Noah when giving up would have been easier. That's real strength. Letting go of it all, Aaron. The inheritance. It felt like the end at the time, I reflected. But now I see. It was the beginning. I wasn't giving up. I was making room for what really matters. We walked to the yard together. Noah was there, adjusting the telescope. There's Saturn, he said, eyes shining. He spoke with ease, explaining celestial mechanics like he was sharing secrets with the stars. The sky was clear. The constellations shimmered above us, silent, witnesses to the journey we had made. My son, once called useless by people who couldn't see his worth, now taught the universe with joy in his eyes. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. Donation received. The amount was exactly what Aaron had once taken from us. No note, no apology, no signature, just a silent gesture. From someone who might be trying to start over. I put my phone away. Said nothing. Some healing happens in the spotlight, like Noah's triumphant moment at the ceremony. Other healing happens quietly, in small gestures, in unspoken apologies that still carry weight. Mom, look, Noah called, adjusting the telescope. You can see Saturn's rings perfectly tonight. I bent to look through the eyepiece, and there it was, Saturn so far away, so clear. In that moment, I felt peace settle over me, like the universe was whispering that everything was in its right place. We'd faced storms of betrayal, loss, and lies, but we made it through, and on the other side, we came out whole, stronger, kinder, and more aware of what truly matters. What had my father said once? Family isn't always about blood, Audrey. It's about who stands beside you when the world turns its back. And looking there, at Benjamin, at Noah, I knew I had found exactly that kind of family. If you made it this far, it's because you feel things more deeply than most. Stories like this don't reach everyone, but if it reached you, then you're part of a rare kind. Leave your comment below. Which moment hit you the hardest? And if you want more stories about truth, pain, and starting over, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We'll meet again in the next chapter.